So first of all, the news about this 18-year-old student Darshan Solanki, dying. So I'm sure like that would have like a very different kind of, or like a particular kind of impact on you as an 18-year-old student yourself. So first of all, like, can you just tell me like what is it to be like basically like young, and like you're going into university obviously with like these hopes for your future, and then at the same time to kind of like have these things coming up and having these realities basically of like caste in our country, of oppression in our country, and to constantly like have these things coming up in news and hearing things like this, like how did it make you feel basically like when this news came out?
I think, whatever sort of news that comes out, you know, a tragic news whenever it comes out about the community, I think it definitely in some way or the other. But the reason why this was so personal is because you kind of see yourself in these students. And, the biggest worry about being a young Dalit student is you constantly feel like you're not good enough. And if go through life being told that you're not good enough, a lot of that stems from, casteism in the sense of having this very uninformed and misinterpretation of the reservation policy. You're constantly labeled as a quota student, which essentially means that you don't have any talents or capabilities of your own, and the only reason you got here is because of reservation. So it's this constant process of being invalidated, of being dismissed, of not being taken seriously. And I think just coming from this sort of background, a lot of us have endured very difficult circumstances. For Darshan, it was a lot of poverty and not having access to certain resources that students from upper caste, Savarna, elite backgrounds have. And so, with Darshan, this is an 18-year-old student who's cracked the JEE. Uh, you know, his father works as a plumber, his mother is a domestic worker. With these kind of circumstances that follow you through your life, to do so well, and when you're finally there, having your potential be questioned and having your merit be questioned is a sort of experience that all of us can relate to. So when it drives you, that constant dismay, the constant invalidation, the constant alienation, of existing in this very upper caste dominated space, higher education institute, it when it drives you to the point of taking an extreme decision to end your life, I think you really feel for this person because you see yourself in their shoes. So personally for me, it's been very difficult to process. When the news came out, just for 2 days, I couldn't talk about it because that's how personal it was for me. And it's also the experience of, hearing this news and then kind of stepping into the classroom, realizing that there is no outrage, you know, there is no public outcry, and not a lot of people care about this. And so it's just that sort of ignorance and it's that sort of unconcerned attitude that all of our, higher education institutes kind of have fostered. And you see that, and you know that it could be you someday, and it really makes you shiver.
So I'm just wondering, like, was this something that you kind of thought of like before coming to university? Like, was this thought in your head that, oh, like, I wonder how bad ragging is going to be, I wonder if it'll have something to do with my caste, and like people Like, I mean, have you heard of like people before you? Have your parents kind of had to have like a sort of talk with you or anything like that?
I think that, just growing up, you already have this consciousness of the fact that you come from a very marginalized background. That's always been there. That's something that you always have in the back of your head. So it doesn't take a very just or a subtly casteist incident to, for one to be made conscious of their lower caste identity. Right. So a lot of kids, just a disproportionate amount of upper caste students, like in my school growing up, had were all US returns. Was in some absurd, way they were all US returns. And I just felt that, oh, what a great coincidence. And you look at your family and you think, oh, what were we doing, back in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, when all of these people were, migrating to the US. Um, we hear that a lot of these kids, come from backgrounds where they have so many of their, grandparents and great grandparents who are educated, professionals in very professional fields. Does that make sense? All of them are doctors and lawyers and this and that, and you can't relate with that. Talking about me personally, my mother, she comes from Tumsar. It's a small village in the Bhandara district, uh, and in Maharashtra. And, she was a first generation learner. Nobody from her family had a formal education. And so what that means is that she had to endure all of these things on her own for the first time without support. And, her education helped her to move out of that village, go to the cities to, be able to just live out her life and have dreams that nobody in her family has ever had. And even had an opportunity to fulfill. And so you realize that my mother's education practically lifted my family out of poverty. Does that make sense? And so, therefore, you realize that is what one person's education can do for one family. And now, so multiply that by 10. And, I've had experiences where people have been extremely casteist. I remember when I was 6 years old, this 6 or 7 years old, this one girl in my school, she came up to me and she asked me what caste I'm from. She said, "Oh, I'm a Brahmin. Are you a Kshatriya or a Vaishya?" And I said, "I'm sorry, I don't know what that means. I'll go ask my parents and come back." And so I went home, I asked my parents, and they said, "Oh, like, we're Mahars, but maybe don't tell her that because it won't be the best." And so, I don't listen to them. I go, I tell her, "Oh, this is the community I'm from." And she said, "What does that mean? Is that higher or lower?" And I said, "Okay, I don't know, but I think it's probably lower." And, she says that, "Oh, my mother told me that I'm not allowed to talk to, lower caste students because they're dirty and they're going to pollute me." And at the time, her mother was a teacher in the school. Um, so it was just very difficult to come into her classroom every single day and sit there and kind of you're made to believe that you're inferior, that your people are inferior, that you don't belong in this space. I remember I had an ex-best friend who, whose, mother, who's also a teacher in the school, by the way. She, I think, found out about my caste identity, and from then, every single time that I was in her classroom, she made me stand up in her class. She interrogated me. She kept badgering me for absolutely nothing that I did, and most times I was sent to stand outside the classroom just because of my caste location. All of these kids who are, um, I come to law school and I realize that all of these kids are third, fourth generation lawyers. And now to say third generation lawyer, fourth generation lawyer does not click very instantly. I'll tell you what it basically means. It means that a student in my class sitting next to me, quite literally in the same classroom as me, has had a great grandfather who's a practicing advocate in the 1900s. Look at the kind of capital that you would have had to have, you would have had, passed down of your lineage to be a practicing advocate in the 1900s, pre-independence. And my mother has, obtained an education, only one, first generation born in the 1980s. So, I'm not, math expert, but me as an individual, I have missed out on a century's worth of financial, social, and cultural capital that I will never have a chance to build. And so, how am I supposed to compete with these students in this classroom? So, that constant, experience that's been in school, people talking about, shaming you for coming from a reserved category.